I'm Heather, and this is the Living with Addiction podcast, where I show you how you have more power than you realize when it comes to helping yourself and your child that's struggling with addiction. Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, whenever you're listening. Today, I'm going to tell you how to create the relationship you want with your child or anybody else. And unless you've worked with me, you've probably never heard some of the things I'm going to share today. And if you have worked with me, keep listening because I'm expanding on some of the relationship work that I've already shared with you. And normally I don't say this, but I think it would be a wasted learning opportunity if I don't point it out today that everything I share can be applied to any area of your life. And that's true for the relationship concepts that I'm sharing today. The concepts that I share are great practices for dealing with addiction, but I've also shared how I use them in every area of my life. So I want to make sure that as you listen to this podcast today, you're thinking about all the relationships that you can apply it to. And what I recommend is listening to this episode once for your relationship with your child. Then listen to it again for a different relationship you want to change and think of that person as you're listening, and you will hear things totally different based on the relationship that you're thinking about. And you can do that with any episode. Just listen and think of how you want to apply it to any other situation. Now, today's episode is going to contain some hard truths. And I just want to acknowledge that up front. So please stick with me as I share these hard truths. I've learned these lessons myself. I've looked at myself in this way because it's totally worth hearing these hard truths and looking at yourself because they are the bridge to your healing. And it takes courage to be open to what I'm sharing with you today. And I hope that you listen with courage and keep an open mind. I mean, you do get to stay angry and in blame if you want to, but you will be stuck there until you're ready to look inward, own your part, learn the lessons, and set yourself free to move forward. Dealing with a child's addiction can be devastating, and you are the only one who can provide relief from that devastation. If you listen to the last episode, you know that I've been experiencing some really just incredibly hard times with my daughter's addiction recently. And yesterday, I said to my counselor that it's torture to watch how tormented my daughter is by heroin, how sick it makes her. I mean, if you've ever watched your child go through withdrawals, it's physically uncomfortable for me to watch. How desperate it makes her that she'll do anything to get it, and how it's just destroyed her in so many ways already. And my counselor said, it's just a mirror of how you torture yourself with her. There's a way out of it for her, and there's a way out of it for you. And she was right. It was a hard truth. I have control of how tortured I am. When I'm in resistance of reality, resistance of what is, judgment of it, and guilt, owning all of the responsibility or a large part of the responsibility, then I am tortured. And when I'm brave enough to be in acceptance and forgiveness and compassion, then I'm in control of being whether I'm tortured or not. And those are our only options in every relationship, including our relationship with ourselves. So please be open-minded about what I share today because I'm going to be as candid with you as my counselor was with me the other day. The first concept I want to share about relationships is that addiction is just a mirror. And I want you to start looking at addiction not as the problem, but as a symptom of the problem. If you're having any problems in your relationship with your child, then their addiction is just mirroring back to you that you have flaws in your relationship skills that need repairs. The addiction is showing you areas of your life where you need growth and change. That's exactly what it showed me. Every area of my life that I needed growth and change. It shined a very bright, painful spotlight on it. And when we think of addiction as the problem and not the symptom of other problems, then we miss this huge growth opportunity because we blame everything on the addiction. And if your child's addiction causes problems in your marriage, and this is really important, those problems were there already and would show up and be reflected by any intense pressure on your marriage, not just addiction. And the same thing is true for how we react to addiction as parents. We have to look at what it's reflecting to us and what we need to work on as individuals. And I know that you might think this sounds like total BS, but I'd like you to think about it because it will serve you to look at it in the way I'm suggesting. Addiction is a teacher, and every relationship in our life is a teacher. Part of our human experience is learning, and these are our biggest lessons and opportunities to grow and change and become empowered to create our own happiness and peace of mind. That happiness and peace of mind comes from love and security. That's what we want from all our relationships. We just want love and security. And when we can give that to ourselves and have it reflected back to us in our relationships, it feels totally different. But often, instead of us creating our own love and security, our relationships are about attachment, dependency, and possessiveness because the other person is the only source of what we want or need. That's why our closest relationships can be the hardest and most painful. If we stay in that state of attachment, dependency, and possessiveness, looking for what the relationship can do for us, trying to get that love and security from the other person without giving it to ourselves first, then we never get to learn from the relationship and we just remain in pain. But when we learn from our relationship and become complete and whole on our own, then the people we love, they're no longer just a means to an end. They're no longer there to fulfill us. They're just there for us to love and learn from. So imagine how different your relationship would be if you approached it that way. When my daughter's addiction started, my relationship with her became very strained. And I was blaming it on the addiction, but it was because she changed our relationship dynamic. She went from meeting my needs for love and security, which, by the way, stop and think about how your kids do that for you. You probably don't even realize how much they meet those needs for you or met them before until it was taken away. And that's part of the initial anger of their addiction, but you probably don't even realize that because you're just focused on the addiction as the problem, the same way that I was. I missed that for a long time because I was seeing the addiction as the problem and not a symptom of another problem. And everything about my relationship with my daughter was hard and painful because I took everything she did and said personally. I showed up in our relationship with so much anger and frustration because I was focused on her addiction as the problem, and I was missing everything it was trying to teach me. I wasn't looking at myself. And even though I have the best possible relationship that I can have with my daughter right now, it's still not the relationship that I want. When she's in active addiction, she isn't emotionally available for the kind of relationship I want with her. That's just the reality of addiction. You can't have a typical parent-child relationship, but you can make the most of what's available to you. And that's what I've had to focus on with my daughter. You can use the information to transform any relationship and be proud of how you show up in all your relationships. One person really can make a difference. Of course, it's nice if both people work at it, but if the other person isn't willing to work at it, you can make changes on your own. And the other benefit of this is how it changes your relationship with yourself. It turns the focus inward and shows you how you're in control of how you feel. You don't have to wake up in the morning and take somebody else's temperature to see how you feel. You will be the thermostat and not a thermometer. So that's how addiction is a mirror. It shows you what you need to work on in yourself and the relationship skills that you need to work on in order to improve all of your relationships. So the next concept I want to share is deconstructing and redefining the relationship. So just a minute ago, I shared that you have to make the best of what's available to you as far as a relationship with your child. You deconstruct the relationship by taking it down to a neutral foundation. It's just an energy exchange between two humans. The word relationship, son and daughter, have meanings and expectations attached to them, and it goes both ways. Think of how much meaning and expectations our kids have attached to the words mom and dad. I mean, we've all felt the weight of it. I know I have. If those words weren't so heavily charged, our kids could never guilt trip or manipulate us. And I just want you to stop and think about that for a minute and let the truth of it sink in. Words alone carry such a heavy burden of expectations, especially when those words define some of our biggest roles in life. So, us and our kids experience the burden of those roles. We have so many expectations about what perfect parenting looks like. And you have to drop all of that because it isn't working. If it was working, you'd be listening to a different podcast right now. That's why I'm saying to deconstruct the relationship to the neutral foundation of it just being two humans and then build it up from there. Redefine the relationship in a way that serves you. So here's a few questions I want to offer you to help you redefine the relationship. What's available to you in this relationship? What relationship capabilities does the other person have? How can you stop acting from fear and guilt and start acting from love in this relationship? How do you feel totally responsible for your child and their happiness? What is their responsibility for their happiness? Are you learning and growing, or are you just expecting your child to learn and grow? What is your child's co-responsibility in this relationship? What skills can you build in order to stay in this relationship as it is and be okay? And I use that as it is because the other person isn't going to change. How can you meet your own needs for safety and security and love instead of looking to the other person to meet them? So remember, you can still ask for what you want in a relationship, but when you ask for it from the empowered place of looking at yourself first and meeting those needs for yourself and then asking for it, it's going to have a totally different energy than desperately needing them to change so you can feel happy. And when problems come up in relationships and our needs stop being met, it's really a beautiful opportunity to see where we're falling short of meeting our own needs. All right, so here's the third concept I want to offer you today, and that's that relationships are just thoughts. Our relationships are simply our thoughts about another person. Knowing this is the secret to transforming any relationship and not giving your power to it. Once you really understand this, your relationships will never be the same. They'll be so much better in every way because your thoughts can be changed. Your relationship with your child is dependent on your thoughts about them. Now, you might be saying to yourself that your thoughts about them are dependent on what they do and how they act, but that's not the case. Because for every action your child takes, there is a multitude of thoughts available to you about that action. I mean, remember the exercise I just walked you through to redefine a relationship? The whole purpose of the questions I asked was to help you create thoughts about the relationship that serve you. Different thoughts equals different relationship. The first few years of my daughter's addiction, my thoughts about her weren't that great. And my feelings were hurt most of the time because I had an emotional attachment to her meeting my needs for love and security. I needed her to be okay so that I could be okay. Since she wasn't okay, my thoughts were judgmental and frustrated. So I challenge you to write down what your thoughts about your child are now and what your thoughts were before their addiction. And unless you've done a lot of intentional thought work, your thoughts probably involve judgmental labels like liar, selfish, destructive, untrustworthy. Once you label someone as those things, then your thoughts become mainly about those labels, and your thoughts start to repeat and multiply about that label. And once you start collecting all those thoughts, they become a story. Your child eventually becomes the story of that label, and you see everything they do is stemming from the story, and it removes their humanness and our compassion for them. The story starts to define them, and it's usually a painful story. It doesn't serve you. It limits your relationship, and it limits your ability to help your child. Who do you think has the most influence on your child if you don't have a relationship with them? Think about it. Obviously, the drugs have the most influence over them if they're in active addiction. But as far as people goes, it's probably other people who are struggling with their own addiction. That's who has the most influence. Whether my daughter is sober or in active addiction, I'm helping her with how I think about her and how I treat her. I know that when she wants my help, I have influence. She listens to things I say to her and she takes them into consideration. Doesn't mean she always does what I want her to, but she's opening to hearing those things from me. And she knows she's loved even when she feels unlovable. And every human needs that. Everybody wants to feel loved. That's what I've been talking about this whole podcast, is how we want to feel loved and safe. So let's switch gears for a minute. I want you to think about somebody that you just absolutely adore. What are your thoughts about that person? Totally different thoughts, right? Those thoughts lead to a very pleasant story about that person. Have you ever met somebody and not really liked them at first? And then your thoughts about them changed, so you started liking them? Can you see now a little bit more, open up to the idea that your relationship is really just thoughts about a person? And relationships involve feelings too. We either like how we feel around somebody or we don't, but since thoughts release the chemicals that create the feelings in our body, then how we feel around a person is based on our thoughts about that person. Your relationship is just a series of thoughts. If a relationship is important to you, then it serves you to choose your thoughts about it. Not just with your child, but with your spouse or partner, your boss, or an annoying coworker, or other family members. Like, imagine if the people who normally trigger you couldn't anymore because you chose very intentional thoughts about them that serve you. My thoughts about my daughter have changed because I intentionally changed them while also reflecting on myself and my own behavior. And if you're approaching your relationship from a clean space, then your relationship becomes less painful because their behavior is no longer about you. It's about them. Don't forget that their actions are stemming from their thoughts and feelings just like yours do. You get to be in control of your thoughts and feelings, and they get to be in control of theirs. How you think, feel, and respond to your child is always a choice. And the same goes for your relationship with yourself. Your relationship with yourself is based on your thoughts about you. It's also the most important relationship that you have because it sets the tone for all of your other relationships. That's why I always say you have to put your own oxygen mask on first. If you aren't showing up for yourself, you can't show up for anybody else. You have to have your own back. Have great thoughts about yourself. Okay, so let me recap because I feel like I covered a lot. First, addiction is a mirror. It's a symptom of the problem rather than the problem. It's a teacher that's here to show you what you need to work on. You need to deconstruct and redefine your relationships starting from a neutral space. What you believe the parent-child relationship should look like isn't working, so you need to redefine the relationship in a way that serves you. Relationships are just thoughts. Different thoughts equals different relationships. And if you want help with your relationship with your child or your marriage is struggling because of your child's addiction, then use the link in the show notes to schedule a call with me and we'll work through that. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you have a great rest of the week and I will talk to you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want to learn more about my work, go to heatherrosscoaching.com. If you want to help other parents who are struggling with a child's addiction, you can do it 2 different ways. First, you can share the podcast with them directly, or you can share it on your social media. Second, you can leave a review. Talk to you next week.